Have you ever been made to feel small, to be dismissed and humiliated by someone who thinks their money makes them better than you? This is the story of Isabella, a waitress working double shifts in one of New York's most exclusive restaurants. One night, a billionaire's arrogant son screams at her, "You're just a waitress," in front of everyone, leaving her shattered. But what he doesn't know is that Isabella is hiding a secret, a past so brilliant it could change the world. The very next day, a single mysterious invitation arrives, an invitation that will not only change her life forever, but will also bring his entire world crashing down. The clinking of crystal glasses and the low, self-satisfied hum of conversation at Ethelgard, one of Manhattan's most notoriously exclusive restaurants, was a symphony Isabella Rossi knew by heart. She moved through the tightly packed tables with a practiced grace, her silver tray held aloft, a small stainless steel moon, navigating a galaxy of glittering diamonds and bespoke suits. Each night was a performance. Her smile was part of the uniform, a carefully constructed mask that hid the bone-deep weariness of a double shift and the heavier weight of abandoned dreams. At 24, Izzy felt 100. Just 6 years ago, she had been the star of Columbia University's astrophysics department. Her sophomore paper, a spectrographic analysis of potential biosignatures in TRAPPIST-1E's atmosphere, had been published in a peer-reviewed journal, an unheard-of achievement for an undergraduate. Her professors had spoken of her in hushed, excited tones. They saw a future Nobel laureate, a mind destined for the stars. Then her mother's diagnosis came. Multiple sclerosis, a slow, cruel, and expensive thief. Izzy's scholarships covered her tuition, not the crushing medical bills, the in-home care, the retrofitting of their small Queen's apartment. The choice in the end wasn't a choice at all. She dropped out, trading her telescope for a tray and her star charts for a menu. Her father had died when she was a teen, leaving them with little more than memories. It was just her and her mum against the world. So she served. She served people who spent more on a bottle of wine than she made in a month. She listened to their casual complaints about the thread count of their sheets in their Hampton summer homes, all while her mind secretly calculated orbital mechanics and traced constellations on the ceiling during her fleeting moments of rest. Tonight, Table 7 was a storm brewing. Damien Sterling and his entourage. Izzy knew the type. New money screaming to be acknowledged as old. Damien, the sole heir to the Sterling Dynamics fortune, was particularly odious. He had the chiseled good looks of a man who had never been told no, and the petulant sneer of a man who desperately needed to be. He treated the staff like inconvenient furniture, snapping his fingers for service and sending back a perfectly cooked steak because he had changed his mind about the sauce. "Waitress!" he called out, his voice slicing through the restaurant's ambient hum. He didn't use her name, though it was embroidered in subtle silver thread on her black uniform. To him, she didn't have one. Izzy glided to the table, her smile firmly in place. "Yes, sir." "How is everything?" Damien swirled his glass of Chateau Margaux, a wine that cost more than Izzy's rent. "Everything is slow. This wine is breathing more than you are. Get us another bottle. And bring some more of those little bread things. Now." His friends, 2 vapid socialites and a sycophantic junior executive, tittered. Izzy simply nodded. "Of course, sir. Right away." She returned with the wine and a fresh basket of gougere. As she leaned in to pour a glass for Damien, the junior executive, trying to impress his boss, gesticulated wildly while telling a story. his flailing hand knocked into Izzy's arm. The expensive red wine sloshed from the bottle not onto the pristine white tablecloth, but directly onto the cream-colored trousers of Damien Sterling's $1,000 suit. A collective gasp went around the table. The restaurant seemed to fall silent. Damien leaped to his feet, a look of theatrical outrage on his face. "What the hell?" he roared, his voice echoing in the suddenly quiet space. "I'm so sorry, sir." Izzy began, her voice calm, despite the frantic hammering in her chest. "It was an accident." He spat, dabbing at the stain with a napkin, only making it worse. "An accident of your incompetence. Look at this. This is Tom Ford. Do you have any idea what this costs?" "Sir, your friend," Izzy tried to explain, gesturing toward the now pale executive. "Don't you dare try to blame my guest," Damien shouted, his face turning a blotchy red. He was enjoying the spectacle, the feeling of all eyes on him. This was his stage. "You clumsy oaf. You probably couldn't even afford the dry cleaning bill for this." Mr. Henderson, the restaurant's manager, was now rushing over, his expression a mixture of panic and placation. "Mr. Sterling, please. I'm sure we can handle this." But Damien wasn't finished. He turned his full venomous attention on Izzy, who stood frozen, the wine bottle still in her hand. He looked her up and down, his eyes filled with a disgust that went far beyond the spilled wine. It was a disgust for her entire existence. "You know what your problem is?" he sneered, stepping closer. "You think you matter. You walk around with this little smile, pouring our wine, clearing our plates, but you're nothing. You're a servant." He jabbed a finger in her direction. "You're just a waitress. What could you possibly know about anything of value? About hard work, about ambition? Nothing." Each word was a physical blow. Just a waitress. The phrase ricocheted around the inside of her skull, striking the fragile walls of the life she had built over the ruins of another. All the sacrifices, the sleepless nights spent studying before her mother's illness, the even more sleepless nights spent worrying after it all, reduced to that one dismissive label. Humiliation, hot and sharp, washed over her. She could feel the stares of the other diners, a mix of pity and morbid curiosity. Her friend and fellow waitress Chloe watched from across the room, her face a mask of helpless fury. Damien, high on his own cruelty, reached into his pocket, pulled out a thick wad of cash from a gold money clip, peeled off several $100 bills, and crumpled them in his fist. He threw them at her. The bills scattered across the floor at her feet like expensive, insulting confetti. "Here," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "For the damages to my ego. It's probably more than you make in a week. Now get out of my sight." Izzy didn't look down at the money. She didn't look at Damien. She raised her eyes and met his gaze, and for a fleeting second, the practiced, placid mask of the waitress fell away. In its place was the cold, analytical fire of an astrophysicist. She saw him not as a powerful billionaire, but as a collapsing star, a chaotic, empty mass, all heat and noise, destined to burn out into nothingness. She held his gaze for a long, silent moment, her dignity, her only shield. Then, without a word, she placed the wine bottle carefully on the table, turned and walked away, leaving the money and a piece of her soul on the floor of Ethelgard. She walked straight through the kitchen, past the concerned glances of the chefs, and out the back door into the grimy New York alley. Leaning against the cold brick wall under the faint light-polluted glow of a sky she once longed to explore, Isabella Rossi finally let the tears fall. The next morning, the city's relentless energy felt like an assault. The blare of horns, the chatter of pedestrians, the distant wail of a siren. It all grated on Izzy's frayed nerves. Her shift didn't start until 5 p.m. But sleep had been a stranger, chased away by the looping replay of Damien Sterling's sneering face and the echo of his words, "You're just a waitress." Her apartment, a fourth-floor walk-up in Astoria, was her sanctuary. It was small, but the afternoon light that streamed through the single large window made it feel less like a box and more like a perch. Books on cosmology and theoretical physics were stacked on every available surface. Strange bedfellows for the medical pamphlets and prescription reminders on the kitchen counter. Her mother, Maria, was asleep in the only bedroom, the soft hiss of her oxygen concentrator a constant rhythmic presence in the home. Izzy was nursing a cup of cheap coffee, staring blankly at a page in a book about quantum entanglement, when a sharp, authoritative knock echoed from her front door. It wasn't the gentle tap of a neighbor or the thud of a package delivery. It was precise, deliberate. Wiping her hands on her jeans, she opened the door to find a man in a crisp, dark grey suit, holding a sleek black portfolio. He looked jarringly out of place in her building's faded linoleum-tiled hallway. "Isabella Rossi?" he asked, his voice as neat as his suit. "Yes," she said, her guard immediately up. "Was this about last night? Was Damien Sterling suing her for emotional distress?" The man didn't smile. He simply opened his portfolio and produced a large, impossibly elegant envelope. It was made of thick, cream-colored cardstock with a wax seal on the back, bearing a stylized S intertwined with a star. "This is for you," he said, handing it to her. He then turned and descended the stairs without another word, his polished shoes clicking with finality. Izzy closed the door, her heart thumping. The envelope felt heavy, important. She carefully broke the wax seal. Inside, an invitation was nestled in tissue paper. The text was engraved in a deep navy blue ink, the lettering graceful and ornate. "The Board of Directors of the Sterling Foundation request the pleasure of your company at the annual Starlight Gala. A celebration of innovation discovery and nascent genius. Friday, July 26, 2025. At 7 o'clock in the evening. The Celeste Ballroom, the Plaza Hotel." Her eyes scanned the formal script, her confusion mounting. The Sterling Foundation. A gala. It had to be a mistake. Then she saw the line at the bottom, handwritten in a bold, confident script. "Honoring Ms. Isabella Rossi." Her breath caught in her throat. Honoring her. It was impossible. It was absurd. This had to be a joke. A cruel, elaborate prank orchestrated by Damien Sterling to complete her humiliation. He'd get her to show up at the plaza, only to have security laugh her out the door. The thought made her stomach churn. Just then, her best friend, Chloe, let herself in with her spare key, holding a bag of bagels. "Morning, sunshine," she chirped before seeing the look on Izzy's face. "Whoa, you look like you've seen a ghost. What's that?" Izzy handed her the invitation. Chloe, a fiery redhead, who worked alongside Izzy at Ethelgard and had seen the whole incident unfold, read it with wide eyes. The plaza. The Starlight Gala. "Izzy, this is insane," Chloe breathed. She flipped it over. "This feels like it's worth more than my student debt." She looked at the handwritten line. "Honoring." You... Her eyes narrowed. No way. It's him, isn't it, that silver-spooned sociopath Damien?" "It has to be," Izzy said, her voice flat. "It's the only thing that makes sense. This is his way of having the last laugh. We should burn it. Chloe declared, her protective instincts flaring. "Seriously, let's light it on fire in the sink. It'll be therapeutic." Izzy took the invitation, back her fingers tracing the embossed lettering. It was a beautiful object, a symbol of a world so far removed from her own, a world she was once on a trajectory to join before life had other plans. Part of her, the angry, wounded part, agreed with Chloe. But another part, the curious scientist, the woman who looked for patterns and answers, was intrigued. The name, Sterling Foundation. It was Damien's family name, yes, but the foundation was something different. It was the philanthropic arm of Sterling Dynamics, run not by Damien, but by his father, the legendary Arthur Sterling. Arthur Sterling was a recluse, a titan of the aerospace and technology industry, who was more like a modern-day Howard Hughes than a flashy CEO. He poured billions into education, scientific research, and space exploration. He was brilliant, eccentric, and rarely seen in public. Why would his foundation be honoring her? As if on cue, her phone buzzed. An unknown number with a 212 area code. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Hello. May I speak with Ms. Isabella Rossi, please?" The voice was female, professional, and clipped with efficiency. "This is she," Izzy said, her grip tightening on the phone. "Good afternoon, Ms. Rossi. My name is Genevieve Dubois. I am the executive assistant to Mr. Arthur Sterling. I'm calling to confirm you've received your invitation to the Starlight Gala this Friday." Izzy was stunned into silence. Arthur Sterling's assistant. "Ms. Rossi, are you there?" "Yes. Yes, I'm here," Izzy stammered. "I received it, but I think there's been a mistake." "I can assure you there is no mistake," Genevieve said smoothly. "Mr. Sterling specifically requested you be this year's guest of honor. He is a great admirer of your work." My work?" Izzy's mind raced. What work? Her work, waiting tables I don't understand. "Your 2019 paper, Ms. Rossi," Genevieve clarified. "A spectrographic analysis of potential biosignatures in TRAPPIST-1E's atmosphere. The Foundation has been searching for you for some time. We were unaware of your change in circumstances. A car will be sent to your residence at 6:30 on Friday evening. We do hope you'll accept." The world tilted on its axis. Her paper. Someone remembered her paper. Not just someone, but Arthur Sterling, the man whose company launched satellites that collected the very data she had used in her research. Chloe was watching her, her expression a mix of shock and dawning excitement. "What is it?" she mouthed. Izzy covered the mouthpiece. "They know about my paper," she whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. "It's not Damien. It's his father." This changed everything. It wasn't a prank. It was real. The invitation wasn't an instrument of humiliation, but one of recognition. The thought was so overwhelming, so foreign, that she felt dizzy. "Ms. Rossi," Genevieve's voice broke through her reverie. A spark of defiance ignited within Izzy. For the past 24 hours, she had felt powerless, defined by one man's cruel assessment of her worth. But this was a chance to redefine herself not as just a waitress, but as the person she truly was. And perhaps, just perhaps, it was a chance to look Damien Sterling in the eye on his own turf, not as a servant, but as an equal, or maybe even more. "Yes," Izzy said, her voice suddenly clear and strong, the weariness replaced by a resolve she hadn't felt in years. "I'll be there." The 2 days leading up to the gala were a blur of surreal anxiety and burgeoning hope. The invitation sat on her small kitchen table like a gilded bomb, a constant reminder of the life-altering event looming on the horizon. Izzy found herself oscillating between wild excitement and paralyzing fear. What would she wear? What would she say? How could she possibly navigate a room full of people who saw the world from a vantage point of unimaginable wealth and power? "Okay, Operation Starlight is a go," Chloe announced, bursting into the apartment on Friday afternoon with 2 large garment bags and a makeup case the size of a small suitcase. "I've called in every favor I have." Izzy looked at her own closet, a pathetic collection of worn jeans, faded t-shirts, and her black work uniform. "Chloe, this is hopeless. I have nothing to wear to a PTA meeting, let alone a gala at the plaza." "Nonsense," Chloe said, unzipping the first garment bag with a flourish. "My cousin works in the wardrobe department for a Broadway show. They had a production that closed early. This was for the lead. She was playing an enigmatic astronomer. How perfect is that? It's a loner. So for God's sake, don't spill anything on it." She pulled out the dress, and Izzy gasped. It was a masterpiece of midnight blue silk that seemed to drink the light in the room. It was deceptively simple in its cut, a timeless A-line silhouette with a modest neckline and delicate cap sleeves, but the fabric was subtly woven with shimmering silver threads, so that when it moved, it looked like a swath of the night sky itself. It was elegant, intelligent, and breathtaking. "Chloe, I can't," Izzy whispered, overwhelmed. "You can and you will," Chloe insisted, already rummaging through the second bag. "I borrowed these from my ridiculously wealthy aunt, who thinks buying expensive shoes is a personality trait. Size 7. A perfect fit." She produced a pair of silver Manolo Blahniks that glittered under the light. "And this," she said, holding up a simple, elegant clutch, "is mine." For the next 2 hours, Chloe transformed Izzy's tiny bathroom into a professional salon. She worked with the focus of a battlefield commander, styling Izzy's dark hair into a graceful chignon at the nape of her neck, and applying makeup that was subtle yet transformative. It highlighted her high cheekbones and made her large, intelligent brown eyes seem even deeper. When she was finally done, Chloe led a nervous Izzy to the full-length mirror on the back of her bedroom door. The woman staring back was a stranger. The familiar, tired waitress was gone. In her place was a woman of poise and quiet confidence. The dress fit as if it were made for her, the deep blue a perfect complement to her dark hair and fair skin. For the first time in years, Izzy didn't see a dropout struggling to make rent. She saw a glimpse of the woman she was supposed to be. A single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. "Chloe, thank you." "Hey," Chloe said, her own eyes misty as she wiped the tear away with a practiced finger. "That's what friends are for. Now no more crying. You have an arrogant billionaire's son to mentally eviscerate. Go make him regret the day he learned to speak." At precisely 6:30, a sleek black Mercedes-Benz S-Class sedan purred to a stop in front of her building. The driver, a man in a black suit and cap, got out and opened the rear door, holding an umbrella to shield her from a light evening drizzle. He nodded respectfully. "Ms. Raza, your car." The ride through Manhattan was like a dream. She sank into the plush leather seat, the city's chaotic symphony muted to a distant hum. The glowing billboards of Times Square blurred into streaks of neon color. She was crossing a threshold, leaving her world behind, and entering another. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was now overlaid with a steely resolve. The dress, the shoes, the car. They were just props. Her real armor was the knowledge in her head and the truth of who she was. The Plaza Hotel rose before them, a fairy tale castle of stone and light. Liveried doormen rushed to open her door. As she stepped out, the flash of a single camera bulb startled her. A few photographers, likely tipped off about the arrival of high-profile guests, were milling about. She held her head high and walked up the red-carpeted steps, the driver escorting her to the entrance of the Celeste ballroom. The room was vast, a cavern of gold leaf, glittering chandeliers and soaring ceilings. Hundreds of people, the absolute pinnacle of New York society, business, and academia, mingled beneath the opulent lights. The air buzzed with power and smelled of expensive perfume and champagne. Waiters, men and women, dressed just as she had all been 2 nights ago, moved silently through the crowd with trays of glistening flutes. The irony was not lost on her. Izzy took a deep breath, clutching her small bag, and stepped into the room. She felt 1,000 eyes on her, a beautiful unknown woman who had arrived alone in a car befitting royalty. She saw whispers exchanged behind hands, curious and speculative glances. She ignored them all, her gaze sweeping the room, searching for one face in particular. And then she found him. Damien Sterling was holding court near a massive ice sculpture of a swan. He was laughing, a flute of champagne in his hand, dressed in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. Standing beside him was Veronica Fairchild, a notoriously sharp-tongued heiress. He looked confident, powerful, completely at home. His eyes scanned the crowd, and for a moment they passed over Izzy without recognition. Then he did a double take. His gaze snapped back to her. The laughter died on his lips. His champagne flute froze halfway to his mouth, his face a mask of smug amusement, just a second before contorted into a stunning tableau of shock, confusion, and dawning fury. He excused himself abruptly from his group and strode towards her, his movements stiff with aggression. He cut through the crowd like a shark, his eyes locked on hers. "What are you doing here?" He hissed, his voice a low, vicious snarl meant for her ears only. "Did you follow me? Did you seriously think you could sneak into a private event like this?" Izzy met his furious gaze with a calm she didn't know she possessed. The fear had vanished, replaced by an almost glacial serenity. "How did you get past security?" he demanded, his voice rising slightly. "Let me guess you're working the event. Did you steal that dress from the coat check? You need to leave. Now, before I have you thrown out." She simply looked at him, a faint, enigmatic smile playing on her lips. She didn't need to say a word. Her presence here in this dress, looking like this, was a louder refutation than any comeback she could have devised. His confusion was her victory. "I'm not leaving, Damien," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "In fact, I believe I'm expected." Before he could retort, before he could call the security, he so desperately wanted to summon a new voice, joined them. It was a voice that commanded instant respect, cultured and resonant with age and authority. "Damien, that's no way to speak to our guest of honor." Both Izzy and Damien turned. Standing there was a tall, slender man in his late 60s. He had a full head of silver hair, piercing blue eyes that seemed to see everything, and a face that held the quiet, unshakable confidence of a man who had built an empire from scratch. He wore a simple, elegant tuxedo, but he radiated an aura of power that made his son's loud bravado look childish. It was Arthur Sterling. He ignored his son completely. His intelligent eyes were fixed on Izzy, and they held a look of profound respect and genuine warmth. "Miss Isabella Rossi," he said, extending a hand. "It is an absolute honor to finally meet you. I'm Arthur Sterling. Welcome to our gala." Damien Sterling's universe. A cosmos meticulously constructed with the gravity of his own ego began to fracture the moment he saw her. He moved through the opulent ballroom with the predatory confidence of a shark navigating its home reef, his friends and acolytes parting before him like lesser fish. His eyes fixed on Isabella were burning with a potent cocktail of fury and disbelief. This was an intrusion, a violation of the natural order of his world. A waitress did not belong here. She did not belong here. He reached her, creating a vortex of sudden tension in the otherwise smooth-flowing social river of the gala. The air crackled. "What are you doing here?" he hissed, his voice a low, vicious weapon, designed to wound without alerting the entire room. He scanned her from head to toe, the midnight blue silk dress that shimmered like a captured galaxy, the elegant sweep of her hair, the quiet, unshakable confidence in her posture. It didn't compute. This wasn't the weary, deferential woman from the restaurant. This was an entirely different creature, and the transformation infuriated him. "Did you seriously follow me? Did you find out I was coming here and bribe some guard to let you in?" Izzy met his gaze and held it. The fear she had anticipated was absent. In its place was a strange, analytical calm. It was the same focus she'd once used to parse complex stellar data. Only now the subject of her observation was the chaotic, unstable celestial body in front of her. She could see the insecurity flaring beneath the surface of his rage, the desperate need for control that fueled his cruelty. "How did you get past security?" he pressed on, his voice rising in pitch. The nearby socialite Veronica Fairchild arched a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, a smirk playing on her lips as she watched the drama unfold. "Let me guess," Damien sneered. "You're working the event. Did you steal that dress from the coat check? Because that's the only way someone like you gets their hands on something like that. You need to leave. Now. Before I make a scene and have you physically thrown out." Izzy's response was not a retort, but a quiet, enigmatic smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The smile was a shield impenetrable and maddening to him. It said, "You have no idea what's happening, do you?" She didn't need to raise her voice. Her composure was a louder refutation of his world view than any shouted defense. "I'm not leaving, Damien," she said, her voice even and clear, a stark contrast to his ragged hiss. "In fact, I believe I'm expected." His face contorted, ready to unleash a fresh torrent of vitriol to finally shatter her composure and prove his dominance. But the words died in his throat, choked off by a new presence. A voice cultured and resonant with an authority that needed no volume, cut through the tension like a surgeon's scalpel. "Damien, that's no way to speak to our guest of honor." The shift in the atmosphere was instantaneous and absolute. The whispers stopped. The smirks vanished. All surrounding conversations ceased as if a switch had been flipped. The true center of gravity had arrived. Arthur Sterling stood beside them, his presence so commanding that it seemed to bend the very light in the room. He had the lean, timeless elegance of a man who had never needed to raise his voice to be obeyed. Damien froze his face, a spectacular canvas of shock. "Father," he stammered the word, catching in his throat. We were just—" Arthur's piercing blue eyes, which had been fixed on his son, with a look of profound disappointment, now turned to Izzy. The Arctic frost in his gaze melted away, replaced by a warmth and respect that stunned Damien into silence. He extended a hand, not as a perfunctory gesture, but as a genuine offer of welcome. "Ms. Isabella Rossi," Arthur said, his voice resonating with sincerity. "It is an absolute honor to finally meet you in person. I trust my son was just welcoming you." The question was rhetorical, its icy barb aimed squarely at Damien. Izzy placed her hand in his. His grip was firm, reassuring. It felt like an anchor in the swirling chaos of the evening. "Mr. Sterling," she replied, her voice steady. "Thank you for the invitation. It's a privilege to be here." "The privilege is entirely ours," Arthur insisted, before turning his gaze back to his son one last time. It was a look of complete and utter dismissal. "Enjoy the party, Damien." With that, he offered his arm to Izzy, turning his back on his heir, as if he were a stranger, as Arthur led her away into the heart of the gala. Izzy felt the weight of hundreds of eyes following them. She could feel the furious, confused stare of Damien boring into her back. The murmurs started up again, but their tone had changed from idle gossip to frantic speculation. Who was she? "I must apologize for my son's lack of decorum," Arthur said in a low voice as he navigated her through the glittering crowd. "He has yet to learn that a person's value is not determined by their station." He then stopped before a small group of academics. "Dr. Thorne," Arthur said, addressing a balding man with kind eyes and a tweed jacket that seemed charmingly out of place. "I'd like you to meet someone. This is Isabella Rossi." Dr. Aris Thorne, a leading figure from the SETI Institute, looked at Izzy, then did a double-take. His eyes widened in recognition. "Rossi, the Isabella Rossi, the Trappist 1E paper?" he asked, his voice filled with the unadulterated excitement of a true scholar. "The very same," Arthur confirmed with a proud smile. "My dear girl," Dr. Thorne exclaimed, shaking her hand vigorously. "Your paper was revolutionary. We've been using your proposed methodology for filtering spectral noise for the last year. It's been brilliant, but I have to ask your application of the Bayesian inference to account for potential atmospheric anomalies. How did you manage to stabilize the algorithm without creating cascading errors?" "We've tried, and our simulations keep crashing." Here it was, a test in a way, a question from a giant in her field. The old familiar thrill of intellectual challenge surged through her. "The stabilization isn't in the algorithm itself, Dr. Thorne," Izzy explained, her voice finding its old confident rhythm. "It's in the pre-processing of the data. You have to apply a weighted covariant filter based on the star's projected flare cycle before running the inference. It creates a baseline that allows the algorithm to distinguish between genuine anomalies and stellar contamination." Dr. Thorne stared at her, his mouth slightly agape before a look of pure enlightenment dawned on his face. "Of course," he breathed. "It's so simple, so elegant. My God, that's brilliant." From across the room, Damien watched this exchange, his stomach twisting into a cold, hard knot. He saw the waitress, the woman he had screamed at, the woman he had thrown money at, effortlessly charming the very minds his father revered. He saw her speaking a language he could not comprehend, moving in a world he could not enter. The narrative he had constructed for his life with him as the protagonist was crumbling around him. A short while later, the lights dimmed. A respectful hush fell. Arthur Sterling walked onto the stage, standing behind a sleek minimalist podium. Behind him, a massive screen glowed with a photorealistic animation of an alien world orbiting a red dwarf star. "Good evening," Arthur began, his voice calm and commanding. "Each year, the Sterling Foundation gathers to celebrate the brightest lights in our world. But tonight, I want to talk about a light that was almost extinguished." He let the words hang in the air. 6 years ago, a sophomore at Columbia University, wrote a paper. She didn't have access to a supercomputer or a state-of-the-art lab. She had publicly available data, a library card, and a mind that saw the universe in a way no one had before. Her paper was a whisper in the data, a ghost in the machine of modern astrophysics. It was a work of such profound genius that it became the key, the Rosetta Stone, for our most ambitious project to date our search for life on other worlds. He paused, his gaze sweeping the rapt audience. But then this brilliant light vanished. Due to a cruel twist of fate, a family tragedy, she was forced to abandon her studies. She disappeared from the academic world. For 3 years, my foundation searched for her. We saw her as a myth, a ghostwriter who had given us a gift and then faded away. We almost gave up hope. Arthur's eyes found Izzy in the crowd, and he gave her a small, imperceptible nod. Tonight our search is over. Tonight we honor the principle that talent is everywhere, that genius knows no social standing, and that a brilliant mind is a treasure that must be nurtured no matter the cost. He leaned into the microphone. The entire ballroom held its breath. It is my profound honor and my distinct personal pleasure to introduce you to the architect of Project Chimera's future, the woman whose mind has guided us from the shadows. Ladies and gentlemen, the guest of honor for the 2025 Starlight Gala, Ms. Isabella Rossi. He began to applaud. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the entire room erupted. It was not polite applause. It was a thunderous, roaring, standing ovation. Dr. Thorne was on his feet, beaming. The other academics joined him, their applause, a welcoming roar. The spotlight found Izzy, and she was bathed in its warm, golden light. Tears streamed down her face, not of shame, but of catharsis. It was a baptism of light, washing away years of doubt and obscurity. And at the back of the room, shrouded in shadow, Damien felt every clap as a physical blow. The puzzle pieces of the last hour slammed together in his mind with sickening clarity. The guest of honor, the waitress, his father's admiration, her paper. It was all one and the same. The woman he had declared nothing was in his father's world everything. He saw the faces of his peers, of Veronica Fairchild, turn from the stage to him, their eyes wide, with dawning comprehension, with pity and with unconcealed scorn. He was no longer the arrogant billionaire's son. He was the fool who had tried to snuff out a star. The applause was a deafening roar in his ears, the sound of his own world being torn apart. He couldn't breathe. Turning on his heel, he stumbled away from the light, from the applause, from the woman he had wronged, and fled into the darkness, a ghost in his own life. The thunderous applause eventually softened its echoes, fading into the vast, gilded ceiling of the Celeste ballroom. But the residual energy clung to Isabella Rossi like a warm cloak. She was no longer an island in a sea of indifferent faces. She was the center of a new, welcoming gravity. Brilliant minds, men and women, whose work she had studied with reverence in the quiet of her small apartment, now circled her, their faces alight with genuine enthusiasm. They spoke to her not as a curiosity, but as a peer, a long-lost colleague, finally returned. The conversation was a dizzying, exhilarating dance of ideas, of redshift stellar nucleosynthesis, and the tantalizing mathematics of wormhole theory. It was Arthur Sterling who finally gracefully steered her away from the growing crowd. He led her not to a stuffy side room, but to a set of glass doors that opened onto a secluded stone balcony. The cool night air was a balm, and the chaotic symphony of the gala muted to a sophisticated hum behind them. Below, the relentless river of headlights on Central Park South flowed like a stream of liquid gold, a familiar sight viewed from an entirely new and impossible perspective. I must apologize if the evening has been an overwhelming experience. Arthur began, his voice a low, considerate rumble. He leaned against the balustrade, his posture relaxed, but his attention wholly on her. Overwhelming doesn't feel like a strong enough word, Izzy admitted, a smile touching her lips for what felt like the first truly unguarded time that night. It's restorative, Mr. Sterling. I still can't quite fathom how you found me, or why you went to such lengths. Arthur. Please, he insisted gently. And the why is simple, Isabella. Minds like yours are the engines of human progress. They are rarer than any precious metal and infinitely more valuable. To allow one to be silenced is not just a personal tragedy. It's a loss for all of us. He paused, his gaze becoming more focused. My team at Project Chimera, they are brilliant, the best in the world. But for 2 years they have been slamming their heads against a computational wall. We knew your paper held the key, but we were only seeing the shadow it cast. We were trying to decipher the answer without understanding the beautiful, elegant language your methodology created. We needed the architect, not just the blueprint. He let the weight of that statement settle before continuing, his tone shifting from professional admiration to one of deep human empathy. Genevieve. My assistant is exceptionally thorough. In her search, she uncovered some of the details of your circumstances. Your mother, Maria. Izzy's breath hitched. The mention of her mother brought the reality of her life crashing back into this fairy tale moment. Yes, she's why I had to leave Columbia. A choice no child should have to make, Arthur said, his voice laced with a quiet indignation. To sacrifice one's own future for the parent who gave them life is a noble act, but it is a sacrifice our society should not demand. Philanthropy, in my view, is not about charity. It's about correcting systemic failures. And your situation represents a catastrophic failure. He pushed himself off the balustrade and stood before her, his expression resolute. Which is why, Isabella, my first order of business is to correct it. The Sterling Foundation is establishing a lifetime medical trust for Maria Rossi. It will be fully funded and will cover every single expense, the best doctors' therapies, in-home care medications, any future needs she may have. It will also retroactively reimburse you for every dollar you have spent on her care since her diagnosis. Izzy staggered back a step, her hand flying to her mouth. This wasn't just an offer of help. It was an erasure of her greatest burden. It was the unwinding of 6 years of constant gnawing anxiety. The weight on her shoulders, a pressure so constant, she had forgotten what it felt like to stand without it, suddenly evaporated. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the glittering cityscape into a watercolor painting. I don't know what to say, she whispered, her voice breaking. You say nothing, Arthur said softly. You simply allow it to happen. Let us carry that weight now. Your mind needs to be free to focus on larger things. He waited a moment, allowing her to absorb the magnitude of the first offer, before he continued. Second, your education. You are to finish it. I have spoken with the president of Columbia, who sends his most profound apologies for losing track of you. However, the choice is entirely yours. A full-ride scholarship, I'm calling it, the Starlight Doctorate Fellowship, awaits you at any institution you name. MIT, Princeton, Caltech. You will have full funding for your PhD, generous living stipends, and a research budget that will make your professors jealous. Her mind, still reeling from the first gift, struggled to process the second. The life she had mourned, the academic path she saw as a ghost limb, was being reattached. It was real. And that Arthur said, a rare, wide smile breaking across his face, brings me to my final and most selfish point. When you have that diploma, there is a role waiting for you. Not an entry-level job, Isabella. A leadership position. I want you to be the director of theoretical research for Project Chimera. You'll have final say on analytical models. You will guide a team of 50 brilliant scientists. You will have priority access to the James Webb Telescope and our own deep space array at Mauna Kea. Your only mandate will be to answer the single greatest question humanity has ever asked. Are we alone? He laid it all before her, a past healed, a present secured, a future she could only have dreamed of. It was a complete restoration of her life, and then some. It was a ticket back to the stars. She looked from the glittering lights of the city to the kind, earnest face of the man offering her the universe. The tears flowed freely now, but they were tears of overwhelming gratitude. Yes, she managed the single word encompassing a tidal wave of emotion. Arthur. Yes, thank you. Yes. It was in that moment of profound, life-altering connection that a third person intruded upon their sanctuary. A figure emerged from the shadows of the ballroom, hesitant and broken. It was Damien. The impeccable tuxedo was now slightly rumpled, his tie loosened. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by the shuffling gait of a defeated man. His eyes were red-rimmed, and his face was a pale mask of utter shame. He stopped 10 feet away, a chasm of his own separating them. His gaze flickered between his father's stony expression and Izzy's tear-streaked but now powerful face. Arthur's presence became immense, a silent, judging mountain. He said nothing, his disappointment a palpable force in the air, leaving the floor entirely to his son. Miss Rosie. Isabella Damien began, his voice raspy and thin, a ghost of its former booming arrogance. I had to. He took a shaky breath, forcing himself to look at her. There are no words to excuse my behavior, not just at the restaurant, but here tonight. What I said to you, it was born from a place of such ugliness inside me, an arrogance that I mistook for strength. He took another step closer, his hands clenched at his sides. When I saw you at that table, I didn't see a person. I saw a prop in my own life story. And when you didn't perform your role to my liking, I tried to hurt you, to make you feel as small and as worthless as I secretly feel every single day, standing in his shadow. He gestured weakly toward his father. It was monstrous. And I'm sorry. I am so profoundly and completely sorry for the humiliation I caused you. Izzy listened, her expression unreadable. She felt the last vestiges of her anger towards him dissolve not into forgiveness, but into a profound, almost clinical pity. He wasn't a dragon to be slain. He was just a scared, hollow man who used money as armor. To continue hating him would be to give him a power he didn't deserve, a space in her new, expansive universe he hadn't earned. Her triumph wasn't in seeing him grovel. It was in her own transcendence. She gave a slow, deliberate nod, wiping the tears from her cheeks with the back of her hand. Her voice when she spoke was calm and clear, holding no trace of malice or vindication. I accept your apology, Mr. Sterling. It was an act of closure, not of communion, a door being quietly shut. And then she turned her back on him literally and figuratively. She looked at Arthur, her eyes now clear and alight with a renewed intellectual fire. Arthur, you were saying that Project Chimera's main issue was the signal-to-noise ratio in the methane analysis. Does your current algorithm account for stellar contamination from M-dwarf flares? Because my paper proposed a filtration model that... Her dismissal was absolute. She didn't shout or insult him. She simply moved on to a conversation so far beyond his comprehension that it was like she had shifted into another dimension. She had closed the chapter on Damien Sterling, not with a slam, but with the quiet, rustling turn of a page. Damien stood frozen for a long moment, an exile in his own father's world. He had offered up his soul in apology, and she had accepted it with the dispassionate grace of a queen, only to immediately return to the business of running her new kingdom. He gave a single jerky nod to no one in particular, turned and retreated back into the noise of the gala. A man finally irrevocably rendered irrelevant. 6 months later, the sterile, recycled air of a hospital had been replaced by the crisp, clean atmosphere of a world-class care facility in upstate New York. Maria Rossi sat in a comfortable armchair by a large window overlooking a garden, a warm blanket on her lap. She looked years younger, the lines of constant pain and worry smoothed from her face. Izzy sat opposite her, holding her hand. I never thought, Maria said, her voice stronger than it had been in years, that I would see you look so light. You carried us for so long, Mia Stella. My star. It's time for you to just shine. Another month later, Izzy stood at a podium in a familiar lecture hall at Columbia University. Her old astrophysics professor, Dr. Miles, introduced her to a packed room of students. Her work fundamentally changed our field, once he said with pride. And I, for one, can't wait to see what she does next. She spoke for an hour on her theories, and the students listened with rapt attention, their faces illuminated by the glow of the complex equations on the screen behind her. And now she stood here, under the immense, silent dome of the Mauna Kea Observatory. The air was thin and cold, a sacred silence broken only by the gentle hum of supercomputers and the quiet whir of the massive telescope adjusting its gaze. Dressed in a fleece pullover and jeans, she held a steaming mug of coffee, its warmth a small comfort against the high-altitude chill. A colleague, a kind, bearded astronomer named Ben, pointed to a quadrant on a massive wall-sized screen, displaying a river of data. The filtration model is working perfectly, Izzy. The noise from TRAPPIST-1 is almost completely isolated. We're getting the cleanest atmospheric reading for Planet E in history. Izzy looked at the data stream, her mind effortlessly dancing through the complex variables. She then glanced from the numbers to the visual display. A stunning, deep-field image. A black velvet canvas dusted with the diamonds of 1,000,000 distant galaxies and unknown worlds. The waitress was a person she barely remembered, a character from someone else's story. Her world was no longer the four walls of a restaurant, but the infinite, breathtaking expanse of the cosmos. Ben leaned against the console, smiling. So, boss, what are we looking for tonight? A slow, serene smile spread across Izzy's face. It was a smile of pure contentment, of boundless curiosity, of a soul that had finally found its true north. Her gaze swept across the starfield, a universe of possibility waiting for her. Everything she said, her voice filled with quiet wonder. Ben, we're looking for everything. Isabella's story is a powerful reminder that you should never ever judge a book by its cover. The person serving your coffee, driving your taxi, or cleaning your office could be a hidden genius, a fallen hero or a future leader waiting for their chance to shine. It teaches us that true worth isn't measured in dollars or social status, but in resilience, intelligence, and dignity. The world tried to tell Isabella she was just a waitress, but she knew she was a star finder, and in the end, she found her way back to her own universe. If this story of triumph over prejudice and the incredible power of hidden potential moved you, please show your support. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs a dose of inspiration, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that will make you think, feel, and believe in the magic of second chances. What are your thoughts on judging others? Let us know in the comments below.